forward head posture, or commonly known as hunchback. Today I'm going to show you how to fix this horrible posture. Now, in the medical community, this is also known as upper cross syndrome. And the reason for that is because in order to create this posture, what happens is the pecs start to tighten up, the cervical neck flexors, also known as the occipitals, they tighten up, trying to keep the head level as you're coming forward. And then while that's going on, you tend to have very weak neck flexors and weak lower trapezius and rhomboids. And so that is the cross. And now, one of the main issues that happens when people are trying to fix this is they don't actually go to the source of the problem. And so if you do that, then I mean, yes, you might fix this, but it's kind of like stretching a rubber band out. Once you let go, the rubber band's going to go right back to where it was. And so that's why we have to go down low to the hips. And now this is usually what's causing it. You have hips that are starting to jut forward. So cross your hands, or right there. So you have hips that are starting to come forward into more of like a hyper lordosis. And then so that kind of pushes you forward. And then as you're starting to dip forward, you have to bring your head like this. You're on the computer or driving the car, and everything is just like kind of forward, and that's creating more of that issue. So either it's anteriorly rotated hips, or bring your arms back up, or you have posteriorly rotated hips. This is known as like the sway back. When this starts to happen, you start to develop more of that kyphotic curve in the upper thoracic. And then in order to compensate for that, you'll start to dip the head forward. And in order to compensate for that, you bring the chin up to keep the eyes level. So both of those can cause it, and if you don't know which one, you might be spinning your wheels doing the wrong thing. So ideally what we're looking for, and the reason why I have this plumb line here, is because we're trying to find a harmonization between the ears, the shoulders, the hips, and the ankle bones. When all of those are in alignment, you have a healthy stacking of bone structure that keeps the burden off of the muscles. And once something starts to go forward, then you're starting to put a burden right here, and that creates a lot of tension, and like that's why these get so tight, is because they're trying to keep the head from falling forward. And so in order to achieve this goal, we need to strengthen the weak muscles and we need to stretch the tight muscles. Now you can also massage the tight muscles, and that will help, but in my experience it's not really necessary, because I've seen yoga instructors, personal trainers, you know, they're able to achieve this goal with just exercises and stretching. So massage is a wonderful adjunct, but it's not essential. It'll kind of speed up the process. So getting into the hips, in order to balance them out, you have the low back and the hip flexors. They are what create that anterior rotation. So if it's too anteriorly rotated, then you're going to stretch out the low back and the hip flexors. If you are in the posterior rotation, the muscles that create that are the abdominals and the hamstrings. So you have these four muscle groups that are just kind of fighting against each other, and if you sit too much, you're more than likely going to have an anteriorly rotated hips. If there's various things that cause each one, but the most important thing is that you just figure out which one it is before you start making these corrections. So namely, what we're going to be focusing on is strengthening the lower traps and the rhomboids, and then we're going to be stretching out the neck flexors and these occipitals. So the first one that we're going to be doing is called the chest opener. In order to do that, we bring the arms up to 90 degrees and we externally rotate the hands, because the main thing we're dealing with is internally rotated shoulders due to excessive forward working postures. And so we bring them up like this, and then all you do is engage in between the scapulas. And so this is going to start to strengthen the lower trapezius and the rhomboids. And so she just brings it back as far as she can. And that would be just like one rep. And so you do like 10 of those, and you know, you kind of build from there. And once you feel comfortable with that, you've been able to do it like freestyle with no weight or anything, it's not causing you pain or discomfort, it's time to add in a little bit of weight. So Katie has a resistance band, and so we'll just do the exact same thing, and then but it stretches over the chest, and with that, you have much more weight, and it's going to build these muscles better, it's going to be able to rebalance the musculature. And the next stage after that is going to be the pull-up bar. Now, don't worry, if you can't do pull-up bars, there is an easier way. We have a chair right here, so go ahead and bring your hands up here. And so she's got one foot on the chair, and with that you can take off like 30 to 50% of your body weight, making it to where anybody can do a pull-up. So go ahead and do one. And so right here, she is accessing all of these back muscles, the lats, the lower trapezius, everything is activated. Come on back down. But it's accessible. And so once you are able to do like 10 of those, then pull the chair out. And once you can do like 4 or 5 of those, then you can like build up from there and get to the point where you can do like 20, 30 pull-ups. And at that point, you should have pretty strong lower traps. And next up, we have the double chin exercise. In order to accomplish this, we'll act as if there is a string at the top of the back of the head and kind of pulling that up while also tucking the chin in. And if you're lucky, you'll create kind of a double chin thing there. It's fantastic for opening up these occipitals. And so if you don't quite feel it, you can also do it while laying down and kind of push against the floor. And then you can also use your fingers to like push the chin in further as well. And so if you don't feel the stretch back here, just keep on working with it. Kind of like try to push in this way, kind of turn this way or whatnot. Just kind of keep tweaking with it until you find that thing. Now, if your forward head posture is so bad that, so kind of come forward in these. If it's so bad that when you try to come back, you just kind of create like a Pez dispenser thing, then, you know, be careful with exacerbating things. In this instant, you'll want to probably either use, you could still use the wall or the floor. It's just that you'll want to kind of bring yourself up. So act as if this is the wall. She'll want to kind of come forward and then lean back onto the wall so that she can actually get that stretch. Now to take care of the excessive tension in the posterior cervical muscles, this is just a basic chair stretch, and it is amazing at taking care of it. So you'll come forward a little bit on the chair. So she'll be about halfway forward. She'll have a straight back, and then bring her hands to the edge of the chair, right in front of you. Okay, and then with that, she'll put her head down, and then leaning back as far as she can. So that'll create an amazing stretch right here. This is depressing the shoulders and helps to create so much spaciousness here. And the reason why the head is forward is because the trapezius goes up and attaches to the base of the skull. And so with that down, it just creates as much space as you possibly can with that. So you have that one there, and then coming forward, she'll keep one hand here. Go ahead and keep your right hand on the edge of the chair. And then dipping this head over to the opposite side. Now the hand helps to keep the shoulder head down, and then she's bringing it over. That helps to take care of some of the tension in the side of the neck. But keyly, what we want to focus on is the sternocleidomastoid and the scalenes, which are like, they've been shortened for so long in that position. And so in order to get those, she'll dip her head back, and then bringing the chin over, and then back as well. That helps to get a certain aspect of them, but then the other aspect is to bring the chin up, but also coming over as well. So this actually helps, because the sternocleidomastoid is attached to this mastoid process right here, and as that goes down here, the best way to stretch that out is to bring the head back that way. So we've gotten the neck flexors from like more the diagonal area, but now we want to get them from straight on. So in order to do this, we'll just dip the head back, and then also lean back as well. So that helps to get them, but you can also multitask and open up the chest at the same time. So interlace the fingers behind and then pulling and really like engaging these lower trapezius muscles. You're going to be strengthening these, opening up the chest, and also opening up the neck as well. So this one is key. You want to be doing this one every day. And from this position, you can fold at the waist and dip down to get the front of the shoulders. So this is going to be stretching out these flexors here, which you've been forward, like driving and on the computer so much that they're partly what is keeping you forward. And so this helps to unwind all of that tension. Now, if you can't do this one, don't worry, there is an alternate that's coming up next. So the alternate is the reverse tabletop. In order to do that, you bring your feet to shoulder width distance, you bring your hands to where they're going to be right under your shoulders, but then twist your hands around to where they're facing towards your feet. That's a much more comfortable way to do this. And then just lift up into it. And you can see how that's bringing her hands back so much. It really helps to take care of the, which one is that? The serratus anterior, and then also just these flexors of the shoulder. This is an amazing stretch. Like if I can only do 5 stretches in one day, this one is going to be one of them. Next up is the foam roller, and we place this on the thoracic spine, just like right here. So come on back down. All right, and with this, she's gonna wanna have her hands up and over, and this is gonna help to open up that chest that has just been closed for so long. This is the exact opposite. She's been like this, now she's opening up wide. And this also helps to just kind of decompress these ribs. And yeah, you just kind of breathe into it and let this do its magic. And now we have the door jamb stretch. This is so wonderful for the pecs. You can either do both at the same time like this, and so it really helps to like lean forward, let the butt like jut out, and you're kind of like diving forward into it. Okay, so you can do both at the same time, or you can go deeper into one at a time. So come over to this one. Okay, she can bring this up a little bit and then step forward with the left leg. And then since she's stepping forward with the left leg, she can also twist over to the right. And then you're twisting over to the right, and then she can lean down further. And that's going to create an amazing stretch. The one thing you want to make sure that you don't do is let this shoulder bow forward. You want to make sure that it stays back. And so yeah, like if it bows forward like this, then it's not really going to get the stretch you're looking for, because the pec is attached right along in here. So if you're bowing forward like that, you're not stretching this out like this. We've already taken care of pec major whenever we were doing the door jamb stretch, but in order to get to pec minor, that one's a little tricky. So she'll bring this hand back to right here, and then she'll twist this arm like so, but keep the elbow right underneath the shoulder. Okay, so she's twisting like that, and then come up onto this right side. And then at this point, she's gonna want to let this shoulder like dip in. And are you feeling a stretch right in there? Mm-hmm. Okay, so she feels it pretty good. Like it's very uncommon that I get someone to feel it that quickly. But so if you're having trouble with it, just sit there and kind of like tweak around, you know, like kind of, the main thing you're trying to do is you have the coracoid process right here, part of your scapula that juts out. That's where your pec minor is attached to, and it goes down and attaches to ribs 3, 4, and 5. You're trying to create more space in between here and here. So that's what we're doing there. And so it's just kind of like tweak around and find how to create more spaciousness in there. Anytime you do like a bench press, that's your pec minor causing that, that protraction. And so what we're trying to do is retract it and also elevate it at the same time. And that's how you get into that. You can also do it on the, like the edge of a desk. You kind of like put it right there and really dig in, especially if it's like a standing desk. You can find it there as well, but you have a floor everywhere. So this is a great option. If you've determined that you have the anteriorly rotated hips, this is also known as lower cross syndrome. And the reason for that is because it typically presents with weakened abdominals, weakened glutes, and then tight lower back, and then tight hip flexors. And so very uncommonly known is actually the hip flexors are weak too, but they're also really hypertonic, so there's a mixed bag there. But right now we're going to focus on the glutes. Now Katie here is an expert at squats, so I'm just going to have her explain how to do it and what to watch out for.
All right, so for a basic squat, it's going to be pretty straightforward. You are just going to take yourself directly down without overarching your back. So if you do have those rotated hips that are rotating backwards, causing an overarched back, you're going to try and rotate those hips forward a little bit. Just bring that balance back in, and you're going to go straight down, keeping your glutes as well as your core and your quads engaged, and that will keep the pressure off of your low back.
Fantastic. I mean, it's very simple, but if you do it wrong, then it will lead to more issues down the road. So just, review that a couple times, make sure you get it in, and do it consistently. Next up is we need to strengthen the abdominals. And we'll give you a few ideas. The most basic one is just a crunch, but there's so many different things you can do. You can look up YouTube, just abdominal routines, and there's infinite amounts. But basic crunch, you can bring your hands behind your head to kind of help to brace it. And then you just come up about 45 degrees. And so do one. Yeah. And you don't even have to come up all the way. Just as long as you feel it right along in the abdomen, I mean, that will help to strengthen it. It's pretty simple. It's just like, how often do you do it? Yeah, that's the thing. Go ahead and show them a couple of the other things that you do.
Yeah. So these are called V-ups, and you can do them with your arms out if you're able to. I don't have that type of balance. So I just brace myself kind of near your hips, so you still are engaging your core. Engage your core, lean back, and you bring your legs up along with your upper body to engage that core, and then...
And I actually really like that one because you're going to be strengthening the hip flexors as well, which if you sit on the computer all day, if you don't have some kind of like walking, standing, moving kind of work, then more than likely your hip flexors are going to be shortened and they're going to be weak. So you really want to focus on strengthening those as well.
Mm-hmm. And other ones are going to just leg lifts. You can do them hanging. So there's the little machines that you can get on at like the gym and hold yourself up. Or you can do them just on the ground. You can either put your hands under your glutes or you can have them out, whatever is easiest for you. I always make sure that my back is completely flat, so I'll rotate my hips to engage my core, and you can do one at a time. And that's it.
With this one, we're going to be able to stretch one hip flexor at a time. And we start in just like a basic runner stretch, but in order to pinpoint the hip flexor, she'll bring this foot forward even more. And that helps to create more of an obtuse angle back there. So she'll come forward, bringing this knee over top. And then at this point, she's going to have a good stretch here. But the one thing you want to make sure that you don't do is let this low back like start to pinch. So you want to really keep the abdominals engaged, keep the glutes engaged, and that helps to keep an erect spine. So go ahead and let those relax and see what that does. It kind of like, it starts to bring that pelvis into the low back. It's not really good for her. So yeah, that's how you do one at a time. You can increase it even more just by bringing one hand over and kind of dipping over and back like that as well. If you've determined that you have sway back, then that means that you have posteriorly rotated hips. Now, that can be caused by many things, but the two main ones are that you have excessively tight abdominals and excessively tight hamstrings. And so one is tight, it's pulling up on the pelvis in the front. The other one's tight and it's pulling down on the pelvis in the back. And so that creates that posterior rotation. Alongside that is usually that you have really tight glutes. And you'll notice if you stand up and you squeeze your glutes real tight, it like causes that posterior rotation. Another thing that happens with that is as you're swaying back like this, it puts your hip flexors into an overly stretched position. So they tend to become weakened and overly stretched and vulnerable to injury. And so whenever you're back like this causes your abdominals to have to tighten up to try to keep you from falling back all the way. And so what you'll tend to do is bow your shoulders forward like this. It looks like crap, but it serves the purpose of giving your abdominals a break. And then so of course, once you're forward like this, you're not gonna be looking down all day, so that'll create the forward head posture. So another thing to keep in mind while determining which condition you have is if you have anteriorly rotated hips, then as mentioned before, this can either like push you forward and cause you to have this kind of like slouched position, but this puts a strain on the low back. So a lot of times people will tend to sway back in order to correct for that. And then once they're back like this, then they'll have to kind of come forward like that. And so even though they look like they have a sway back, they don't have the sway back proper. They actually have anteriorly rotated hips and they're adapting to it by swaying back as well. And so it's just another weird adaptation that occurs. And so just because somebody's swaying back doesn't mean that they have sway back. I know it gets a little confusing. So that's why we start down here. The main cause of these pathological body postures is lifestyle. And so how you sit, stand, sleep, all of these predispose you to developing a certain condition. And so with the sway back, it's posteriorly rotated because you tend to be slouching all day long, or maybe not all day, but often enough to where your body learns to be in that position. You tend to have the butt scooched forward on the chair, your low back isn't even touching the back of the chair, and your mid back is what makes contact with it. So this puts you in a bowed in position, puts a bunch of pressure on the low back, and that's probably why so many people have. Low back pain is the most common medical issue in the world, and so that's probably one of the major causes of it, as well as herniated discs. So paying attention to how you're sitting, but then also how you're standing. Are you up straight or are you bowed back? Are your knees going forward? Like, what's happening here? So like start to pay attention to where everything is and get everything in alignment with how a plumb line would be. Granted, you're going to be fighting against how everything has been conditioned, so don't worry about it too much. Worry more so about these reconditioning exercises, and that will get it to where it won't be so hard to just stand up straight. Very commonly, whenever people try to stretch out their hamstrings, is they touch their toes. And now, although this does do a great job of stretching out the hamstrings, it also has the added benefit of stretching out the low back. And the problem there is, as we were saying, the low back and the hip flexors create anterior rotation. The hamstrings and the stomach create posterior rotation. So if you're stretching out the hamstrings and the low back at the same time, then you're canceling out the benefit that you're looking for. So what we're going to do is isolate the hamstrings. And the way you do that is the runner's stretch. And so you come into, with your knee right over your ankle, you bring this foot back far enough to where you can start to feel a stretch in the hamstring, and I don't feel anything in the low back right now. So this is perfect. You can also come over, if you're right here, then you can also start to come down, and this will increase that hamstring stretch
And you got to be careful not to stretch out the hip flexor here too. So you might even come up like this, and I can still feel it in the hamstring without stretching the low back or the hip flexor.
Now for the abdominals, another very common way of stretching those out is to do the cobra pose. And again, this does stretch out the abdominals, but it also stretches out the hip flexors. So in order to isolate the abdominals, you'll want to come into what the yogis call the cow pose. And so you're coming into it like this, and you want to dip in to where you're jutting out the butt and you're allowing everything to go into an anterior rotation. And as you dip in like that and you push up all the way, you can feel a really good stretch in the abdominals, and you can kind of play around with these. I'm even feeling myself start to strengthen the low back as well. So that's perfect for trying to recondition sway back. And so with this, I'm starting to get it and kind of, you know, feel around, find where it is, dip in, and just figure out how to get that abdominal stretch without stretching out the hip flexors. And now for the glutes, they tend to be not only excessively tight, but also weak. So you'll want to do the squats like I showed you in the previous section, but also stretch them out with what the yogis call the pigeon. And so you come forward, and this is, you're kind of coming into like a cross-legged position, and then so you can either bring this up and come into it like this, or you can have it right here, and then you can twist over and come into it like that. Sometimes this is a little easier to do. I personally prefer to do it on my bed. So you just put your knee up on the edge of the bed and then twist into it in that same way. Makes it a lot easier to do. You don't have to get on the floor to do it. Now, one key point is that I know I'm telling you to stretch and strengthen certain muscles, but on the regular basis, you want to be stretching and strengthening all of your muscles. You just want to be stretching and strengthening these particular muscles a little bit more so that you can recondition the body. But if you don't regularly stretch and strengthen, then your body's just going to start to break down or get overly tight and lead to injury, osteoporosis. There's so many things that happen if you don't regularly maintain the body. So don't like start spinning one plate over here and forget about this plate over here and let that one fall down. You want to keep the fundamentals, the basics going while you're striving for more. So if you have this condition, more than likely you, this is also known as upper crotch,